Hello everyone, hopefully this is working. I'm Alan Pope and welcome to Snapcraft Live. We do this every so often and you're welcome to join us in the chat when we do this. At the moment we're settled on this time slot on a Friday, but we may move this around, shake it up a little bit so that people can join us from different regions and make sure that everyone's able to take part. I would appreciate it if someone in the chat could let me know if audio is working okay, if I've not messed up things and everything seems to be working. Looks to be working from my end. Waiting for that confirmation from the chat. Yes. Thank you, Joe. Very kind of you to drop by. Great. All right, let's start. So, this time on Snapcraft Live, I wanted to talk about something that's in preview. So, if you're using the version of Snapcraft to build snaps that's in the store that you've been using, that's published in any of the normal channels, then you might not have seen this feature. You have to kind of install a special preview version of Snapcraft to be able to use this feature. And there are some caveats and some warnings before you go diving in and using it. I'd strongly recommend reading through the notes that I'll show you before we dive in. So what we're going to cover, the title of this I put as Preview Multi-Arch Remote Build Service. And you may know that I've previously talked about our build service, build.snapcraft.io. You can get to it with snapcraft.io/build. And the idea of this is you hook this up to your Git repository and have our build system automatically build your snap and then publish it to the store. So what I want to talk about is something else, something newer. Let's talk about the process that you might go through when you're building a snap, right? The process you usually go through is, you've got your project source code and then you use an editor of some kind to create a Snapcraft YAML. And then you run Snapcraft debug or shell after or something like that in order to build the snap. And what you'd be then doing is building on your local machine or some machine in your control or a VM or something. And what you'd get out is a snap that's built for that architecture. So if I were to do this on my laptop, I'd end up with a AMD 64, 64-bit x86 snap, which is fine. And I can install it on my local machine and I can test it. And that's great. If I were to then hook up to build, push my code to GitHub and hook up to build, what I'd end up with is if I push to Git and then hook up to Snapcraft.io/build. If I do that, which is a natural next step, what you're likely to end up with then is multiple builds. So this one will give me native, which would, in my case, AMD 64 or x86, 64, whatever you want to call it. And if I hook up to build, I might get AMD 64, i386, armhf, ARM64, or whatever you want to call it, AArch 64. And you'll get lots of different architectures. But you might not be ready for building all of those yet because you haven't tested it. Like, let's say, for example, you build an armhf version of your application, but you haven't actually tested whether it builds okay on ARM, and you haven't tested whether it runs okay on ARM. And you might not want to push this to the store yet before you've tested. So what you might want to do is insert a little step here, and this is the bit that we're going to talk about here, is use the remote build service to build for multiple architectures. And so when you're iterating on your snap, you can run Snapcraft locally to get it built on your local machine. And then you can use the service that I'm going to talk about today, remote build, in order to build for multiple architectures. But this would just be for you. You'd be building it for you as the developer of the application. You could push that snap manually onto a Raspberry Pi if it's armhf, or maybe onto a 32-bit machine if you're still building i386, and you can test it before you ever get it into the store, before you hook it up to the build service. So that's the bit we're talking about today, is the remote build service. So the goal is we want to understand how to do this, why you want to do this, and some of the limitations of this process. So what I would suggest you do is head on over to the Snapcraft forum, and this post written by Claudio, who was the lead developer on this feature. And what this details is all the how to get set up and how to get it all working, and all the caveats. So I think it's best if we just go through this, right? So there's a bit of info here, blurb at the top, about why you might want to do this. You might want to build for other architectures. It's as simple as that. We've got a preview build of Snapcraft. Now you'll notice here it says it's in this beta remote build branch. So if I go to my terminal and I do snap info Snapcraft, you'll see that there is stable, candidate, beta, and edge. And we have the ability to push to special branches in the store, which are kind of hidden. So you can't see the remote build branch in here. You just see the standard channels, stable, candidate, beta, and edge. And what Claudio's done is push to this branch called remote build. And this is so that you can test it without us exposing it to the entire world and people installing it and not having read this information. So it tells you here how you get that. You snap refresh, Snapcraft, channel equals beta remote build, right? So that's how you get this software. Now, I've already done that. You can actually see that. It says there, I'm tracking beta/remote build. So this probably will say no changes needed. It should say no changes needed or something like that. Anyway, I'll leave that chugging away. So we've got a special build of Snapcraft. And this is a brief intro to what it looks like in action. So what you're going to do is run Snapcraft normally, but you're going to add this additional parameter, remote build, and then specify all the architectures you want to build for. What magic happens after that is pretty cool. It will send the source code for your project, all the project assets that normally would build locally, to Launchpad. So Launchpad is launchpad.net. And it's a system we control. And Launchpad has a system of builders. And these builders are machines that are used to build Ubuntu and packages in PPAs, debs that are in PPAs, and also snaps. So if you use the build service, you're actually under the covers using Launchpad, this build farm. And as you can see over on the right hand side, there are lots of different architectures supported. So what's going to happen is if I Snapcraft remote build and specify some architectures, it's going to push my code into Launchpad, build it, and when it's finished building, pull the snaps down to my local machine, which is awesome and brilliant. It means I don't have to try and build it on a Raspberry Pi or try and build it on some other i386 machine. I can just leverage the build system that we already have in Launchpad. So you can see there, I did snap refresh Snapcraft, and there are no updates available because I'm already running the right version of Snapcraft. So let's go back to the forum post, if I can find it. So what you'll do is Snapcraft remote build, and then it sends the data to Launchpad after asking you if you're sure you want to do this. Now, this is the first caveat. When you do this, you're sending your code, and it's going to become public on Launchpad. So if you're building something that's closed source, proprietary, and you don't want it to become public, then right now I wouldn't use this service. This service is great for open source applications. Okay, right now it doesn't support private code hosting. So it's going to send the data to the remote builder in Launchpad and build it for whatever architectures you specify, and then wait. So it might take a while for it to build. If we go back over to the build farm, you'll notice there are queues for some of these builders. And depending upon how busy all the builders are, and that fluctuates throughout the Ubuntu release cycle, and also depending upon how many snaps are being built. If loads of people have pushed a load of snaps to the build system to be built, then they'll queue up in here. But it's a free build service, so the offset is you're going to be waiting in a queue with other people who are using this free build service. Okay, so that's where it ends up, is in Launchpad, and when it's finished building, those snaps get pulled down to your local machine. So Snapcraft then becomes a long-running process on your machine, waiting for the build to finish, and then the build gets pulled down to your local machine. So I'm going to start doing this in a minute, but I wanted to mention, I wanted to talk about this this if interrupted, but I'll do that once we actually start building it. I'll come back to that because it's a bit more interesting and a bit of detail. Now, in order to do this, you've got to have a Launchpad account. We're not just going to let anyone arbitrarily throw code at Launchpad. You've got to already have a Launchpad account. Now, obviously, I already have a Launchpad account. You can see I've got my username up here, right? If you don't have a Launchpad account, you can register for one. If you just go to launchpad.net, there's a register button in the top right-hand corner. Away you go. So I've already done that part, is setting up with my Launchpad account. Now, the other thing you need to do is put an SSH key in there, and you'll find that in your personal area on Launchpad. There is a button down here where you can add SSH keys. Okay, so you need to put your SSH key in there, and it tells you what to do when you go through that process. I'm not going to go through that, partly because I don't want to show you bits of my SSH key, but the documentation for how you do that is all linked in here as well, right? So these are the prerequisites. Get a Launchpad account, put your SSH key in Launchpad, and then you need to register with Launchpad. Does it say that? It says that somewhere in here. I thought it did. Where is it? Register. Ah, there it is. There we go. This authorization here. So this is the next thing, is you need to authorize your machine in Launchpad. Let's just do that, right? So I've already created a Launchpad account, and I've got a project here, my word salad application, that I want to build for multiple architectures. So we normally would just do Snapcraft, but what we're going to do here is follow these instructions and do remote build, right? And I can also specify my Launchpad user account, and this is how I tell Snapcraft my account in Launchpad. And in theory, this should work. Remote build user Popey. Now, Popey is my Launchpad user account. You can see that over here. If I hover over there, you can see actually in the title bar here. So you'll just put your Launchpad account in there. Now, in theory, this will connect to Launchpad. Ask for my SSH key. Ooh. Whoops, I got that wrong. And it wants me to authorize this computer on Launchpad. So Launchpad has this concept of authorizing external applications. And it's saying here, do you want to allow KinkPad K450, which is the host name of my laptop? You can see that there. Do you want to authorize this laptop to be able to access your Launchpad account? And you need to be able to do this. You only need to do this once. And so if you want, you could say, I only want to do it for 1 hour if you want to test this out and then remove access to your laptop, or for a day or for a week. I'm going to set it to until I disable it. Every time I show this, people ask me why it's called KinkPad. It's because it's a ThinkPad and it's running KDE, right? That's why. So that's it. I have now authorized Snapcraft to talk to Launchpad. Now, it's started building. Well, it's sent my code to Launchpad now. I now just have to wait until that's finished building. So let's go back to... I see in the chat, Claudio, the author of this piece of software is in. So if you've got any questions about this, ask in the chat, because Claudio's here. So what I did was this. Snapcraft remote build -- user. and it sent my software off to Launchpad in order to be built. Now, I mentioned up here this line where it says resume with. Now, what does that mean? Some projects take no time at all to build, and the queue of builders will be empty. You know, in the ideal situation, there's nobody building anything, and all those builders that you see here, the build farm, there's no queue, there's nothing waiting, and you just slide in there with your code, it gets built, and the snap gets pulled down to your laptop, everything's done, right? In the real world, there are queues. Like, there's a 31-minute job for 64-bit ARM, and there's a 32-minute wait for estimated for armhf. So typically you'll push the code and then wait. Now, you could go off and do something else while you wait, obviously. Go make a cup of tea or something. But what if it's a really long-running build, or there's a really long wait? Well, you can, shut your laptop down and walk away, because the Snapcraft can reconnect to Launchpad and get your build much later. So, for example, you could kick a build off on a Friday, shut your work laptop down or suspend it, walk away, come back on Monday, resume, and the snap will get downloaded later. I assume it survives a couple of days. I might be wrong, check with Claudio, but that's the theory, right? So it says, if interrupted, Snapcraft remote build recover. Now, let's do that. So what I'll do is I'll just take a note of that, this ID here, and I'm going to simulate me going home for the weekend by just Control-C on that. That hasn't killed the build. The build is happening in Launchpad, but it's killed my Snapcraft process monitoring the build. If I just do recover, it's now checking with Launchpad to see, whether the build is finished, and when it does, it will pull the snaps down. Now, if we lift the curtain up a little bit, we can actually go and find those builds on Launchpad, and you'll find them in your profile page on Launchpad. Down here somewhere, there is a link to snaps. There we go. Underneath PPAs, view snap packages. And these are my snap packages. If you click that link, you'll see your snap packages. And you can see up here, there is a name, Snapcraft, and then a generated name. And it's registered about 10 minutes ago, or 5 minutes ago. And if I click on it, you can see it's uploading a build. Ooh. I'm getting lots of tips in the chat from Claudio, so I'm getting quite excited about this. You'll notice that it's building for MD64 and i386 by default, because I didn't specify an architecture. And if we go back to the notes, I think you can see somewhere down here, it talks about how you specify the architecture. There you go, --arch. And in this example, they specified the architectures, but you can also do --arch equals all, and that will build for all supported architectures. I'm learning also some extra stuff. Oh, it's finished. Okay, so it's now finished. It built in Launchpad. In fact, if I go back to Launchpad and refresh this screen, they've now gone because it's finished building, and I've retrieved my my snaps. So now I have a snap built for AMD64 and one built for i386. Let's kick off another one, and this time what I'll do is what am I doing? Remote build, and I'll do arch equals armhf and arm64. Okay, let's try that, because I've already built AMD64 and i386, so I don't need to do that again. Use my SSH key to get into Launchpad. Okay, building for those two architectures. This may take some time, especially given that we know, according to the build farm, there is a little bit of a queue on ARM64 and ARMHF. So I have a bit of time to show you this. So let's go back to that snaps page. I'll show you this and then show you what Claudio showed just now. And if I go down to my snaps. Now, I also learned from one of my other colleagues that there's a quick and easy way to get to this page. Rather than go to your own page and then navigate to view all snaps, you can do this. If you go to launchpad.net /+ snaps is a shortcut to show you your snaps. The tilde gets replaced with your ID, and that will take you straight to your snaps. That's rather cool. So now we've got a new one built 5 minutes later, And if we look at this one, needs building. So it hasn't started building yet. It's sat in the queue, probably waiting for some of these others. Okay. So we got some additional info from Claudio there. So if I run Snapcraft remote build -- status, and then get the status number from wherever it was, there it is, and go across here, let's see what's happening. So this queries Launchpad, and sure enough, needs building, which is exactly the same state as down here in the web page. So it shows you exactly the same kind of thing. That's rather cool. So, you could check in with it every so often, directly from your terminal with Snapcraft, or you could go to the web page and scroll down, look at your snaps, and see how the build is progressing. Now, obviously, I've got the world's smallest snap here. It's a tiny shell script. But if it was something monstrous like LibreOffice or Firefox or something like that, you kick off a remote build, walk away, go and have a pint, have a coffee, have your lunch, come back. But you can check the status of it like this. I think this is a game changer. This is just fantastic. Because for myself, when I build a snap, I only ever build it for the one architecture on my local computer, which is going to be 64-bit Intel. But I want to test them on a Raspberry Pi. And my local Raspberry Pi, I could certainly push the code to my Raspberry Pi and run Snapcraft on my Raspberry Pi. But it's really slow to build on a Raspberry Pi. And there's not a lot of storage on the SD card. And the SD card's slow. And there's not a lot of memory in my Raspberry Pi. So I think it's preferable to build on these remote machines. Obviously, if it's an open source application, then it's suitable. If it's proprietary, closed source, then you don't want to use this because it's pushing your code into Launchpad. And those pages that you saw, you can go to those as well. You could go to my snaps page and see my snaps and even see the source code, right? So that's what I mean about it being public in Launchpad. Anyone could go in there and see your code. So don't use this for closed source stuff, but if it's for open source projects, this is ideal. It's fantastic. So I'm just going to catch up with some things that Claudio said. On a good day, a very small package takes about 3 minutes for the fastest builder, which is S390X. Building word salad for S390X. What a time to be alive. What else? We also have a pull request to download the build logs. That would be really cool. So if you pull down the build logs, then you'll be able to look at them locally, because looking at build logs in a browser through Launchpad is a little bit clunky, and it's easier to get them locally, and you can use local text processing like grep and whatever to pick out errors from your build. That's awesome. That's pretty much everything I wanted to show you today because it's just so awesome. Any other things I should mention? No, it doesn't look like it. There's a few extra things in there that you might want to read up on, but I would strongly recommend, if you're building something open source and you're building for multiple architectures, dive over to this forum post, try this out, and let us know how you get on. Don't forget, if you want to revert back to the standard stable supported build of Snapcraft, you can do that. When you're finished doing this, you can just snap refresh Snapcraft -- stable, and it will revert you back to the stable channel, so you're not running this special branch of beta remote build. Claudio says there's going to be a warning about the code being public. That's good. That's good to show as well. So that's it, really. It's a nice simple demo for a working demo this week, which is good. And I'll mention one other thing. I mentioned earlier that you can connect Snapcraft to Launchpad, and I've set it to be authorized this laptop with my Launchpad account. If you're in any way concerned about the fact that you're hooking up this machine to Launchpad and you're a little bit worried about that, you can actually disconnect it again. If you go to your Launchpad account, there's a section called Authorized Applications right here. And if you just click on that, scroll down until you see your laptop host name, and then you could just deauthorize it again. That's what I did earlier on today, so I could re-show you authorizing, because I authorized yesterday. So that's useful if you don't like the security implications of leaving something having a registered connection in Launchpad. That's it. So I made a few notes over here. I think we've find the build logs. Oh, I didn't mention that. That's something I didn't mention. So when the thing is building, how can you see the build logs after it's finished building? Is that possible? I know when you go in here, you'll see a link to the build log here. But after it's finished building, they get cleaned up, it seems. I can't see the previous build. Claudio, maybe you know this. I mean, he said there's a PR that'll pull the build log down, but I can't see the previous build, which is a bit of a shame. I guess they get cleaned up because there's going to be a lot of them queuing up. But while it's building, you can see the build log in here, or wait for that PR to land so that the build log will get pulled down with the snap. What else did I want to mention? Oh, that's everything. Huh. Oh, also, I need to add in here Snapcraft remote build status build ID. So if you have any questions, I'd recommend taking them straight over to the forum and following up with Claudio there. He's the lead developer. He's sat in the chat right now and can answer questions there. But a nice short Snapcraft live for this week, showing you a preview of remote builds to build multiple architectures of your snaps. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. I'm tracking that forum post as well. We'll see you next time on the next Snapcraft Live. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.